Hello and welcome to Test Master Talks with Kevin Sullivan. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, of course, the star of the show, the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in the history of the business, the man behind the NWO, the man behind the 83 weeks of dominance in WCW. He is the games master, the taskmaster, the devil himself, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
Great, my man. How are you, JP?
I'm doing good. Just it's interesting. We always said on this show, like just the facts, no bullshit. And we want to kind of get into certain things. But I was reading the other day about the backstage fight. This is 1997 now between Kevin Nash and Roddy Piper. And I know on this show we've talked about backstage fights, of course, with Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Vader. You seem to be more honest than others. I mean, obviously, some people will not to say make things up, but maybe they remember things differently. But you obviously have no skin in the game. Do you remember the backstage fight in '97 between Kevin Nash and Roddy Piper?
No, I wasn't there that night. So, I mean, I don't even know what happened. Uh, I knew, I don't know why I wasn't there. Uh, I probably, I probably had a, yeah, they probably sent me someplace else to do something that they thought might have been important, line up a town or something. But they had heat for quite a while, Piper and Kevin, and uh, you got to remember that these guys, meaning when I say these guys, the Pipers or the Flairs, not so much Rick, but Hogan's, did they keep guys down? No, not really, but they're really protective of their spot. They didn't want to put guys over. I don't think Piper. Can you, when he was running hot in WWF at the time, did Roddy put anybody over?
Really, if you really look at it, I know we lost to Rick Rude. It was real. I mean, it was a televised house show, but it was like that was kind of iffy. Then I know he lost to Tito on the house show. I know he lost to Snuka once, but it was like very few and far between. And really, the only guy he really super put over was Bret Hart.
Right, and they were supposedly cousins, right?
Yes, yes.
So you can see how they had laid. There was a very great story about the they laid the road down, and Kevin and Scott said, "Yeah, but they had to fill in the potholes, right?"
Yep.
And that has ring somewhat true. Do you know what I mean? And uh, I've heard different stories. I mean, I've heard I've watched some commentaries with Nash, and I've watched some commentaries with Piper. Completely different stories, right?
Oh, yes. Can't get more complete. They're more completely different. Yeah.
You know, uh, Roddy says he leg dive, I believe, leg dive Kevin, kicked him around and threw him out of the dressing room. And then Six, I never heard Kevin really talk about, but Six tells about it. Uh, Roddy came up to Kevin and Kevin just slapped the shit out of him.
Yep.
Is that what you heard?
Yep.
So, I mean, we're seeing things completely different. There's always your side, my side, and the real side. So, who knows what happened?
Did they both have a lot of political power just as far as like saying, hey, I'll want this creative, I want this creative, we're changing this, we're changing that? Or is it always a kind of give and take or negotiation with those guys?
No, I mean, you got to realize Kevin and Scott, before they hooked up with Hogan, came in and literally set the place on fire, right?
Yes.
Then Piper came in later, correct? He didn't come in like they did.
Right. October 96 at Halloween Havoc. Yep. Months later. Yep.
Right. So Piper is Roddy Piper. he drew money. And did he help? Absolutely. But I had to save his ass, brother. Remember how he came in with that group of 5 guys?
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that was awful.
I
Yeah.
saved that. Do you know that?
How?
How did I save it? Okay, he had John Tenta, who they said was a guy off the streets. Remember that? They didn't tell anything about his background, right?
Right.
And they tried to say he was off the streets, that they forgot about him being in New York and working more for us too. Then they had the kid that was supposedly Piper's handler, the kid with the kilt and the goofy hat. What was
Yep.
his name?
Oh man, I forget his name, but
Sean.
yeah,
His name was Sean something, I believe. And then who else did he have?
the boxer.
Yeah. And himself, and they had one other guy. Am I correct?
I think it was just those 3 for that show
Okay. Then
when they were doing uncensored.
that was in Atlanta, right?
Believe so.
When they came out on TV, and Piper did his shit, right?
And the segment went way long. Yeah. Yep.
I was there, and everybody was watching, and Eric and everybody said, they've killed him. He's killed himself. I said, no, we can save it. They said, you can't save that. That's horrible, blah, blah. I said, yeah, we can. They said, how are you going to do it? I said, we're going to have Piper tell the truth. They said, what do you mean? I said, Piper's going to come out and said, I'm glad I did this trial run because I can't. And John Tenta got really hot about this. Piper said, I can't go in and fight the NWO with this kind of talent. I'll get destroyed. So I'm going to reach out to my old friend, enemy, Ric Flair. And that should have been the way we should have started it, because Piper and Flair, right?
Yep.
But that saved that, because if he went in there with those guys for a pay-per-view, the pay-per-view would have bombed. But when I put him with Piper, they did a hell of a number. And so there was heat. As smart as Roddy was, and he was a smart guy, sometimes he would box himself in. You know what I mean? He would come up with an idea, build on the idea, but then he would start adding pieces, and it didn't work. So him and Kevin got crossways. So I have no idea about that fight, but if I was going to be a betting man, Roddy was getting up in age. He wasn't old, but he was getting up in age. He had a hip replacement.
Yep.
And he was going against Nash. I mean, people don't understand. Kevin Nash, I knew of Kevin when he went to University of Tennessee, because I was wrestling in Knoxville off and on for the Fullers. Kevin sparred with John Tate. Do you know who John Tate was?
The heavyweight boxer?
Yeah, he was the world champion. If he had lasted another 20 seconds, he would have beat Hercules Weaver. Do you remember Hercules Weaver?
Very vaguely.
Okay, he would have knocked him out with 20 seconds left to go in the fight. And Tate had won. It was 15th round. Tate had won 13 of the 14 rounds they had fought. But Kevin sparred with him. Kevin was in incredible shape. He was 7 feet. Could Piper have beaten him? I'm not sure, but I would have bet on Kevin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Nash was in his prime too.
Yeah, so I don't buy the story that he leg dived Kevin and knocked him down and beat him up and threw him out of the dressing room. I don't see that.
So interesting you mentioned the John Tenta stuff because the build up to Uncensored 97 is kind of where it started from, like you were saying. It was Piper, John Tenta, Leighton Morrison, and then Craig Malley, your buddy, Craig Malley. I
Yeah,
can't believe we forgot Craig. But
yeah.
that was the group. And then obviously the Horsemen got the change up, if you will. He calls Flair, which sets up the little thing with him and Flair so that he gets Benoit, Mongo McMichael, and Jeff Jarrett on his team. Flair obviously is injured. When Flair does return, it is Slamboree 97, what we're talking about. Was there anything that happened in that match that set up the fight backstage? Because backstage, when it happened, apparently Nash was unhappy with something Piper did in that match. Did you ever hear that Piper maybe went off script or something?
Here's what I heard, that Kevin told him, we can't jumpstart this match. Whether it was right or wrong, Kevin was the heel, but Kevin was the babyface, Piper's the heel. But
No,
Kevin,
Piper's the babyface. It was Piper, Kevin
Yeah.
Green, and Flair.
Yeah,
Were
yeah.
the babyfaces.
that's
Yep.
what I
Yep.
meant.
And then
And-
Hall, Nash, and Six are the heels. Yep.
Right. And where I'm going with this is, he said, we can't jumpstart this match. And maybe that's right because of Kevin Green. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But that shouldn't have been a big enough problem. But that seemed to be a problem for Nash and Hall, that the guy wouldn't listen to them. You know what I mean? They thought, and rightfully so, that they had grown out of being young guys in the business, that they were drawing money. So Piper jump started it right away. You know what I mean? And they had to put in time. So Kevin's thought was, how are we going to put in this time if we jump started? You know what I mean? How are we going to calm it down? So something went wrong there. And again, this where the fight supposedly happened was in Boston, right?
Well, it actually was in Charlotte when they really supposedly started a fight after Slamboree.
Well, they had words in Boston, I remember. Yeah.
It is interesting though because Hall, Nash, I guess sometimes would jokingly say, especially Hall, they're not jobbing, not losing the guys. But we've talked about this on the show all the time that Hall and Nash would actually job and lose to guys in certain situations. But obviously, they're top stars. It's got to be the right timing. And we were talking about Piper had sometimes a problem jobbing, not really jobbing per se, but sometimes, he would have a problem putting guys over. I mean, Hulk, for God's sake, never put over Hogan. So.
Right.
Is that the issue too? That they're both kind of going back and forth? Like, I'm not putting you over. I'm not putting you over.
Well, look at Kevin and Scott in 6. And I think this was Six's idea, that they all lost at the same time.
Yep.
And I mean, how right was that call by Six? I got a question the other day what I think about Six. He's the only guy I know that's in the Hall of Fame twice for 2 different groups. So I think in the world of him, I think he's a very intelligent guy. And so I'm sure he came up with that finish and walked them on the plank on the pirate ship that they could accept jumping off into the deep water, Kevin and Scott. And it was done at the right place, Charlotte.
It seems like if you job to Piper, then he'll do the job to you, not vice versa. He had to beat Hogan first, then Hogan job. The outsiders had to lose to him here at Slamboree, and then they get to beat him in a tag match against Flair at Great American Bash the month later. So is that right with Piper? Kind of a little bit tit for tat?
Yeah, I think so. But here's the other thing. We talked about Hogan and Savage, Lucy in the football.
Yeah.
When he puts Piper over and goes to sleep for Piper, it's a non-title match. And everybody in the building, including myself, thought it was a title match the way it was advertised.
Including you?
Including me.
Right.
So
me too, as a fan, yeah.
So it's almost like what he did to Randy, right? So I mean, it's a shame that they couldn't get along, but I understand why.
If you look at it, what Piper said, he took him down, kicked him out of the locker room. He had the takedown. Nash says that he bitch slapped him, knocked him down, and kicked him out of the locker room, basically, that, that kind of thing. But Six, like you said, he kind of basically agreed with Nash, but he did say, I guess, Nash hyperextended his knee, like he further hurt his knee during that little altercation. So I think Piper was taking like a little bit of the truth with the knee and kind of throwing that in there, but not wanting to say, he got bitch slapped by this monster, and kind of making himself look bad. So I kind of got to go Nash and Six on that one, but it's just one of those things where it's like, wow, I can't believe two of the biggest names in the industry at that point are fighting backstage basically because of politics.
Right, right. But I mean, it was uh, it was like swimming in the water in the ocean with blood in it, and the sharks were always swimming around. It was very, very political at the time.
And it's interesting with Piper. I mean, go all the way back to the '80s where he wouldn't job to Hogan, right? So I was buddies with King Kong Bundy. We talk about it all the time. He was saying that he loves Hogan. Hogan got him over, and what happened was basically, I guess, in Vince's head, he was almost thinking like it's got to be Hogan Piper WrestleMania 2 in the cage, right? I mean, like kind of blow it off. But then they kind of went a different direction with T and Piper because Piper would never put Hogan over, so they're not going to put Hogan and Piper in the cage together. So Hogan was basically like, "Oh, I love this guy Bundy. I brought him to Japan with me. I can make money with this guy, but also we'll do the story. We'll injure my ribs, but I know he'll lose to me in the end." Is that something like you would think of Piper too? It's like, wow, if you even think about it, even guys in the business are thinking like he's not putting some guys over. If he won't put Hogan over, maybe he won't put me over.
Yeah, I'm sure that happened. If you weren't putting a Piper, if Piper wasn't putting Hogan over, why would he put anybody else over?
Right. And Bundy, like what said, he's kind of like lucky because he got WrestleMania 2, he got the main event, he's on the poster, he's making all that money.
Right.
Kind of not just because Piper wouldn't job, but you would think that it was because Hogan and Piper wasn't going to happen in WrestleMania 2. They kind of had it obviously way thought out, but they had to change gears.
If you follow logic from WrestleMania 1 to 2, it should have been Piper and Hogan.
Yes. Yep.
They had been together since the dawn of rock and wrestling.
Yep.
They had the score to settle it all on MTV.
Yep. The war to settle score. Yep.
Yeah, the water settle score. They had the most publicity of a heel or a baby face. And then I like King Kong Bundy, but you're sliding a brand new guy in there, and maybe rightfully so as a substitute, but it was a lot more storyline with Piper and Hogan.
Big time. Yep. And they had the pay-per-view match at the Wrestling Classic too that went to a DQ with Hogan and Piper. So again, it was like, my God, like he's not putting Hogan over at all, really, just by DQ and count out, things like that, but not by submission, not by pinfall. And I guess, probably wouldn't even lose to him in the cage match. So you kind of had to go in the Bundy direction, which if you look at it, turned out great for Bundy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty just amazing that Piper can kind of do that, but he's Roddy Piper. So it's not like anything saying anything bad or degrading him at all, but it's one of those things where I guess Piper can be Piper because he's Roddy Piper, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I think you're right.
With Nash and him, did they ever kind of like get over it? Because I remember this is years later, they were arguing on Twitter and Piper had his podcast and Nash was supposed to go on there, but as far as I know, he never went on, and I don't think that show ever happened. Did they ever make up?
I don't know. I mean, if he didn't go on his podcast, that's funny because I'm going to be on Kevin's podcast next Monday.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. If he didn't, if they didn't work that out by then, I mean, It's too bad because they're two of the biggest names in the history of the business. It's just too bad.
You're gonna have to ask Kevin about this Piper stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
look at
I
that.
will.
That's awesome.
I will.
Does I know you love Nash, but does Nash love the Booker man?
Well, I think so. I think Kevin and I mean, Kevin used to come down to the Keys every year to train and work out. And, he stayed at the same hotel, and we'd always have a big party for him and his family. Big barbecue. Yeah.
Pretty cool. You're going to be on that with him. It's awesome. Did he ever like pick your head, if you will, pick your knowledge, pick your brain as far as like booking and stuff? Or was that
Oh,
a
yeah.
big topic conversation?
I was Kevin's assistant when he was the booker. Uh, Very smart guy. Saw things differently. Up on everything. Anything that was happening in the world, he knew how to bring it to wrestling, like the Tupac headband. You know that when he used to wear it backwards, Kevin, and the knot in the middle, like Tupac.
Yep.
He made references to Attica. Remember when they handcuffed him?
Yeah, Attica, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he made references to the counterculture. I mean, he would wear stuff like the rappers were wearing.
Yep.
Uh, he's just a smart guy. He can talk to you about anything. Whether it's art, wine, fine cooking, baseball, football, hockey. And he's really funny. A really funny dude.
Nash is the man. Can't
Yeah,
uh, can't knock big Kev, big sexy, if you will. Can't knock him.
yeah.
All right, the topic at hand today: NWA Great American Bash 1988, Baltimore, Maryland, at the Baltimore Arena in front of about 14,000 people. Big crowd here. Pay per view buys estimated is somewhere around 190K. I don't know if that's actually accurate or not, but that's pretty damn good for NWA and JCP. And of course, the tagline is the price for freedom here, July 10th, 1988. You're there. What's your role? Are you just a wrestler, or are you part of the booking committee with Dusty as well?
Uh, I, what year was that?
1988.
Well, I had been in the office for Crockett. So if I was, yeah, I think I had a little input from me and JJ were the assistants. So I think I might have had a little input, but not much when he worked with us. You know what I mean?
Yep. When you look at this show, this will technically be the last pay per view for the National Wrestling Alliance and really the last NWA event presented by JCP, aka Jim Crockett Promotions. Does that mean anything, like as far as historical significance in your mind, or is it just, Turner's buying us and we're gonna, we're moving on up?
No, at the time it didn't, but as you just pointed out, it was the last dying investment of the NWA, which had been
Really?
in business since 1948.
Really, 1988, JCP's really last year. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Ted Turner buys them, creates World Championship Wrestling. They're born and they're bred, and a Starrcade 88 would be really the first pay per view by WCW, although they still called it an NWA event. So, JCP, as far as you're concerned, are you like, I don't know, like, are you getting paid like an employee from them and then you have to go over to Turner? Like, how does that work for you?
Uh, I got paid for the going, what my position on the cards. Then I got paid a salary for being an assistant with James Dillon and, for Dusty.
Were you worried at all about the bankruptcy? Like thinking like, "Oh man, like I'm gonna lose a paycheck here." Or you knew Turner's taking over. You're not worried at all.
Well, I knew if Turner was taking over, and I had become friends with the guy that was the acquisition guy, who later really helped me years later. Uh, can't even right now. It just jumped out of my mind. His name, very nice guy, and he told me what was going to happen. We're going to have contracts, and we were going to have a paycheck every week and things like that. So I was all for that.
When you look at the end of JCP, sad kind of looking back, do you think like something could have been averted? Maybe the planes, like what do you think about the end of JCP?
I'm going to ask you a question. I,
Hmm.
I I hate to bring up this conspiracy shit. Okay, I really do.
Yeah.
It's fucking ridiculous. You're an accountant, and you're supposed to be the head accountant of a very successful company, right?
Hmm.
Or at least this, bringing you massive amounts of money, the most your company's ever had. How do you let it get 2 million in debt and no way to pay it off quickly and not say anything?
True.
I mean, how does that happen? You're the head accountant. I'm sure. I don't know how many accountants they had, but I know he wasn't the only one, right? You would think someone would go up to him and say, "Hey, don't you see, you know, debit and credit? I mean, don't you see we're in trouble here? No, we're gonna be okay." I never understood that. The plane thing was ridiculous. I told you they used to go to Greenville, right? And I was always had a seat in the plane, and I wouldn't go because I would leave later than the plane would, or maybe not later than the plane would, approximately the same time. But I get home earlier than they would because fooling around, stopping to get what they had to get, and getting to the plane in the last match was, and it was 90 miles, 90 miles.
Just drive. Yep.
What? I don't understand it. So, uh, Jimmy wasn't paying. None of them were paying attention because they could never have thought that that was going to fold because the money they were bringing in.
Do you think that that stuff outside of it, like forget about all that stuff, because obviously that led to the bankruptcy and led to the end of JCP. But just because of WWF's dominance, do you think that JCP could have, had the success, or do you think that it went the way it was always going to go?
They had a great foothold, meaning Jimmy Crockett. If they had not done some silly things like moving the company to Texas, right? Buying Central States, because it meant nothing. Raping and pillaging Florida, and then buying it, and then trying to run it completely different. They did, buying Watts's office in Dallas. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking.
A lot of wasted money for sure. And obviously, with WCW, I mean, you could be a viable number two, but it just seemed like JCP too many mistakes, yeah, to hang around.
Right, right.
So they hang him up, and Ted Turner will be soon, to be coming. Obviously, Starrcade '88 will be WWE's real first pay per view, but this will be the last for JCP. Like I said, 190K supposedly is the buy rate, so not bad. So it's not like they were dying off a slow death. I mean, decent on the pay per view buy for sure.
Right, right.
So the main event, a dark match, if you will, is Rick Steiner and Dick Murdoch defeating Kendall Windham and Tim Horner in about 4 minutes, 30 seconds. That's not a part of the pay per view, just kind of the main event dark match, if you will, just like the pre show. little match. Nothing really to write home about here, but it's just interesting that Ricky Steiner is on there, and his name obviously keeps popping up in the news lately. Unfortunately for him, I don't know if you saw that or not with him
Yeah, I
recently.
saw that today. Yeah.
So the one thing I didn't get about that was with Rick Steiner. So they said you have 24 hours to do something, and if you don't do it, we're taking you off. Otherwise, you're allowed on it if you do something within 24 hours. What was that about?
I don't know, but what I saw today was he's off.
Yeah, it was something like he had to issue an apology within 24 hours or something, and they never got the apology.
I mean, I have no idea what went on. You know, what I mean, I know what they said what happened, but I mean, I happened to be there in L.A. at that day, but I never saw anything. We were way away from one another. You know, he was like I was in the front of the building, and he was way away from me. So I don't know what happened, but they made a big deal about firing him and not going to ever use him, and then they invite him back.
Yeah. Very
So
interesting because Tony Hunter was booking both Steiner brothers, and obviously it's Detroit, Michigan, like kind of the home of the Steiner brothers there. So he's bringing them back in for WrestleCon. They were promoted, they were coming in, and then all of a sudden, High Spots had said that who runs WrestleCon, if anybody doesn't know that, basically was like, nope, we rethought it, and he's not allowed in. I guess there was a public backlash or something. There was something negative said about him being brought back in.
oh yeah, I saw uh, there was a huge backlash. You know what I mean? A huge backlash, and I was surprised. Not that I have any dog in this race, and I really like Rick. I don't understand if you fired him, made a big deal of it, why you invited him back. You had to know what was going to happen, right?
Right. Yep.
I mean, am I right that you
No,
had
I
to?
totally agree. Yeah, I thought that was weird too. I'm like, oh wow, he's back. Okay, he's back at part of WrestleCon. Like, oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah,
After they made the big stink about how he's not allowed back. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah, that was kind of weird too because it's like there's no second chances anymore for anybody. Like that's it. If and I don't even know if what he did or didn't do, if it's actually 100% accurate or whatever. I don't really don't care. If they have the proof, they don't have the proof. I'm just saying, like, let's say he did it. Are we allowed to have second chances or no?
yeah, and I mean, I never got a clear what happened. You know, what I mean, I know he said supposedly, allegedly said some things, but the the person that came by more than once, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, nobody ever had to me. I mean, nobody should bully somebody about what how their lifestyle is. But I never really got a clear story. Did you? Did you ever? I mean, I know there was some statements made by Rick, but I never got. Did they somebody come up to him uh, that ran the show or represented the company running the show and said, "Hey, calm down, blah blah blah. You need to apologize." I never heard. It was almost like you heard. It was almost like you putting a puzzle together. You know, you didn't know what really transpired. I thought.
I'm still unsure of it as well. I'm not really sure exactly what happened, but obviously, if he's bullying or doing that kind of stuff, obviously, I mean, you can't stand for that. You can't have
Right.
any of that sort of stuff. But we
Right.
never really got a clear. What did he say? All that other stuff. And did he apologize? Did he not apologize? Does he have to do a public apology? We kind of looking for more answers than we have. Well, we're looking for more questions than we have answers, I guess.
Right. Right. So, who knows?
So Ricky Steiner will not be at WrestleCon this year, as previously we thought he was. But moving back to the pay per view, the first match of Great American Bash '88 is a National Wrestling Alliance World Tag Team Championship match. The NWA World Tag Team Champions Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard with the aforementioned James J. Dillon fight Nikita Koloff and Sting in a pretty damn good match here. They go to a 20-minute time limit draw. What do you think about Arn and Tully versus Sting and Nikita going to a 20-minute time limit draw to start the show?
I don't like it.
No, why not?
Going to a draw.
To start the show?
Yeah. I mean, those were big names. You could have done anything with that. That was an open slate.
Do you want Sting and Nikita as tag champs, though, or no?
I didn't say that. I mean, you could dump a lot of heat on Arn and Tully. You could start a little angle. You could start a big angle.
Yeah.
That there was something happened during the finish that was a little etchy catchy, and one of them took opposition to how it happened. I mean, there's a storyline. Or if you wanted to beat the heels, which I wouldn't have done, because Arn and Tully were fabulous, and Nikita and Sting were great singles. I mean, there was so much you could have done rather than going through 20 minutes.
Do you like or do you not like that is the first match in a 20 time limit draw, or do you not like it because it's on pay per view that is a 20-minute time limit draw?
I don't like it that it's on pay per view and it's a 20-minute time limit. And I also don't like it that you have four of your top guys, your top tag team, and two guys that you're using on top every night, and you can't come up with something to have people talk about. And I understand when you're under the pressure producing these all the time, sometimes it's easy to go the least resistance. But with this one, I think, as smart as Dusty was, he could have came up with a finish that caused a little rift between Sting and Koloff.
For sure. And the thing is here, Sting is over like rub. I mean, he is like super duper over here. So he puts Tully in the Scorpion Deathlock, and as he's about to win, the
That,
time limit expires. So I mean, you did put some major heat on Arn and Tully, and the finish really with Sting almost winning it, but like you said, you just don't like it how it goes to a draw.
yeah, and it's kind of a blueprint, that when you have these kind of matches and you need to draw, the guy puts the Scorpion Deathlock on, or Harley's pinning Superstar 1, 2, and the bell rings. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think about Sting at this point in '88 here? I mean, we're talking about July of '88, but are you thinking he's so over? He's probably the most over guy on the roster if you really look at it. Are you thinking world title picture ready for him, or is he too green at this point? You got to get him amped up a little bit.
I mean, this was Dusty's, book, but I think Dusty saw him as a future contender, if not the champion.
Would it be crazy to say we got to push him, give him the title right away, or is that something you got to wait? You
Oh,
have to be as a booker, you got to be patient.
yeah, you can't push him all the way. I mean, let's go back to the Ultimate Warrior. How was a guy so over that he replaced Hogan, and when he replaced Hogan, he didn't draw?
Interesting. How does that work? It obviously happened, but how does that happen?
The holes were humongous. The holes were humongous. He was very limited, you know.
What about Sting though? Sting wasn't as limited as Warrior.
At that time, he wasn't. When did he have his first Clash of the Champions with Rick?
So it was, believe, a few months before this show. So it was '88. But yeah.
You remember that match?
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, 45. Flair carries him for 45
Yeah,
minutes, though.
he was gassed for 30 minutes of it.
Right. Yeah, Flair is leading him. Yeah, big
Yeah,
time.
I mean, big time leading them. No disrespect, he was a young boy, but Rick was leading them. He was gassed out of his max. How could he? Okay, now let's go into a fictitious scenario. Now it's Sting versus a heel they got over with limited ability. Nikita. This is no disrespect to Nikita, but he was a young boy too, right?
Yep.
They're going to go, they got an hour time limit and they got to go 40, 45 minutes. How do you think that match would have been?
Yeah. Right. Probably the same. Yeah, he's still green. Probably can't do it either.
It would have sucked.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would have
Yeah.
sucked.
Yeah.
So, no disrespect, but you can't play in the NFL if you didn't play in college normally. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You have to have some kind of experience, and I don't think that Sting would have been ready for that. And I think the same thing would have happened with him that happened to the Ultimate Warrior. The holes were gaping, and people saw through it very early.
And 2 years later, just about Great American Bash 1990, Sting does win his first title, and he beats Ric Flair for the
Yep.
title. But at that point, obviously, he's much better, and he is ready. And obviously, as people would know, Sting was obviously a lot better in the ring than the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, that's just obvious.
Right. But he was working with Rick. He was working with everybody to get him there. You know what I mean? It was
Yes.
2 years of going to college. So
Yep.
he's done an amazing career. Amazing.
Another interesting thing about this match in particular, Nikita Koloff comes back, and he was at Bunkhouse Stampede '88. He's bald. He comes here, and he's got the full hair, and he's got the flat top. That doesn't seem very Nikita Koloff like with the flat top. Was that weird or different, or does he have to get that approved? Why the hell did he come back with the flat top?
I have no idea, but doesn't fit the character to me.
Right? I mean, he still looks big. He still looks intimidating, but it just looks weird. He almost looks like a cartoon version of himself, like with the hair rather than the bald head and the goatee, you know?
Yeah, something was different about his life. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Does that have to be approved, like from you guys, from the booking team? Like, hey, I'm going to come back with a different look.
I think it would have to be approved by Dusty. I would think, Dusty. I'm sure Dusty wasn't happy. I'm not sure. I can't say that. I would think that Dusty wouldn't have been happy with that. I mean, he had, you know, been very successful with the bald head. I mean, I don't know what he was thinking.
Not that it's like a completely different look, but I mean, different gimmick. It's similar gimmick, but obviously it's a different look. But it's almost like when superstar Billy Graham was doing that karate gimmick. It's like, what the hell? What does he think? You know what I mean? What are you doing?
Yeah, that was the worst gimmick of all time. What Superstar did.
Also, I got to note the announce team, Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, which is a great duo. Pretty funny. They're both still around today and still announcing for AEW. So just an interesting little side note that Schiavone and Ross, your two buddies, are still hanging and banging here at the
Right.
announcement.
Right.
This match was kind of interesting just for the ending. So Nikita and Sting actually thought they won the tag titles. They're celebrating. Then Gary Michael Capetta says it is a 20-minute time limit draw. So again, that gets the crowd hyped, and then boom, kind of tells them it's the draw.
Yeah.
So as far as the next match is concerned, it's an NWA United States Tag Team Championship. So do you like having two different tag team titles? You got the US title belts and the regular NWA tag team title belts.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Does it justify that though, having two different tag team championships? Like, is there enough teams? Is there enough talent? Do you think it justifies it?
Absolutely. Going back to the early 50s, on the national product that was coming out of Chicago, right? Luthez was the was the world champion, and Vern Gagne was the U.S. champion.
Yep.
Why not? If you have all those guys, plus you got to remember why they were doing it. They had 2 and 3 towns a night running. You had to have a main event or a semi-main event with a tag match that meant something.
That is true. I didn't even think about that. I was thinking, like, do you really? I mean, I love the U.S. titles. I even love the presentation, the look of it. But I always thought it's like, yeah, that's true. If they're running different towns, you want to say, hey, the tag team titles are on the line here. It's
Right.
town A, town B, vice versa.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
this is
at that time, they were running minimum of 2, sometimes 3, and occasionally a 4th one.
wow, really 4?
Small one, a small town. A real spot show, you know what I mean? Like I know at one time there was 3 towns running, and Jimmy Valiant and Ivan Koloff were on the main event of the 3rd town, and I loved to be on them because I was always in a good spot, right below them, and they were drawing big, you know what I mean? And they didn't have all the stars on that show, but Ivan and Jimmy were drawing huge money, and there were nice towns. There were not Panama City. What's the one on the coast? Myrtle Beach. And then there's another town by there too. There were nice towns you could go over and enjoy yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And then when I said the 4th town, that was very rare. But what it was usually is some kind of spot show that was bought. Someone paid for it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it would help out for publicity. So they would use the great George Souths of the world, and maybe put Pistol Pez Watley, who was over on their TV against George South, and a couple of other guys, maybe guys that were just coming in or just getting ready to leave. So it was more of goodwill running the 4th town. And it didn't happen much, but the 3rd town, yeah, it happened a lot.
Maybe throw in your buddy, the Italian stallion, Gary
Yeah.
Sable. Maybe
Yeah,
throw him out there, right?
Yeah.
So this is an NWA United States Tag Team Championship match. The NWA Tag Team U.S. Tag Team Champions are the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers. They're going to be wrestling the Midnight Express, Beautiful Bobby and Sweet Stan, with the manager James E. Cornette. If the Midnights lose, if the Fantastics win, Jim Cornette will receive 10 lashes. That's an old school stipulation, huh? If I ever heard one.
Yeah, 10 lashes. I love it.
So obviously, all the pre-match stuff, getting super heat on the Midnight Express. The Midnight Express end up winning the U.S. Tag Team Championships. They defeat the Fantastics in about 16 minutes and 25 seconds. Very, very a good match here, as you would expect from the Fantastics and the Midnights, who almost seem like they never could have a bad match together, oddly.
Yeah, they used to have great matches. I mean, they were like the Rock and Roll Express with the Midnight Express. I'm sure they've had this match before, the Rock and Roll against the Fantastics. I'm sure that would be a great match.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the finish came obviously when Beautiful Bobby smacks and beats Bobby Fulton in the head with a chain wrapped around his fist, punches him in the head with the chain. They cheat, they get the win. Tommy Rogers tries to protest after the match, kind of goes for naught, as the legendary Tommy Young kind of says the decision stands and the Midnights are the new champions. Of course, kind of makes the Fantastics look good that the Midnights cheated, and kind of continues on the feud and doesn't really kill the Fantastics, right? That they
Right.
lost the match, but they lose by cheating.
Right. Gets more heat on the heels and gives the baby faces an out.
And then, of course, they take off Tommy Young's belt and they end up beating Cornette a little bit, getting some lashes in on Cornette. So that at least they had some measure of revenge on Jimmy Cornette and the Midnight Express after the cheating.
Yeah, good.
Do you like Cornette with the 10 lashes? You do like that, huh? You like
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean,
The crowd hated him. My God.
yeah. I mean, they really hated Jimmy, and you know, it gave the uh, Fantastic a little pizzazz. You know what I mean? Even though they lost, they were smart enough to get the belt and give him a couple of lashes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Get the emphasis off of them losing.
So next matchup is an interesting one. You're in it. The Tower of Doom match, the three-tiered cage, which is a quite an interesting concept here. The triple-decker cage, if you will. Whose idea is this match? I
Right.
mean, this seems crazy. Okay, so where'd you come up with it from?
Because it was supposed to be me against Jimmy. Only me against Jimmy. And Precious was supposed to be in the bottom. And I was supposed to hurt Jimmy in the cage and slowly make my way down to the bottom of the cage, to the ring, and be like a Frankenstein monster stalking her. And then we were supposed to have all these great spots with Patty and Jimmy. But they decided to overload the card with guys that had no idea of our program at all. You know what I mean? That was designed for our program. I don't know why they ever did it, because it just watered it down. You know, I had broken Jimmy's leg with a cinder block. Did you ever see that?
Yes. Yes, good. Very good, Kim Mac.
Yeah, it looked real as hell. I mean, Jimmy
Yep.
got a special metal thing to put his leg in. I took that cinder block and dropped it. And we had put the cinder block out for a couple of weeks, you know, like it was on TBS. It was part of the background. And when I picked it up, it was like I was just looking for something to stop him. And I picked it up and Jimmy sold it like he was dead. And we had a lot of heat going in that. And I don't know why they jumped off of it completely, because it made no sense. You know, they didn't have a personal issue with Jimmy. I was.
When you look at it, like the whole angle, the whole feud, was right, was you wanted Precious, right? That's kind of the centerpiece of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That,
obviously that's his wife. Jimmy Garvin's going to want to kill you when he's pissed.
right, right. And that I was playing mind games with Jimmy, blah, blah, blah. But we had done some vicious stuff on TV. You know what I mean? Uh, she actually hit me one time with a crutch that Jimmy was on when suppose he broke his leg. And I mean, she didn't mean to swing it as hard. She probably did. She swung it as hard she could and it hit me right in the head and it busted me open. I was bleeding with my hands down. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we had done, and then there was a time she was in the dressing room, afraid of me being in the building, and then all of a sudden she's not in the building. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So the angle was done very well, but loading guys up on the card that meant nothing. Not that they didn't mean anything, but it meant nothing to the angle. I never understood it.
You're right. It is kind of weird because the whole thing is you and Garvin, but really
Right,
you and Precious is kind of
right,
like the whole thing.
right.
So the match is the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and of course Ron and Jimmy Garvin with Precious versus Al Perez, Ivan Koloff, Mike Rotunda, the Russian Assassin, and yourself, the Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, with Gary Hart and Paul Jones on the back. On the sidelines. And the winners of the match are Team Garvin. The Garvins, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and the Road Warriors. The match goes about 20 minutes. Pretty good. I mean, not great, but pretty good for the most part. Way better than Uncensored 96 when Hogan and Savage kind of have to go through the cage, which you were part of as well. You know that very well,
Yeah.
which was awful. But it's interesting. So at the end, you kind of almost push Jimmy out and almost give them the win, but that just means that you're alone in the cage with Precious, right? I mean,
Right,
that's the whole thing, right? You don't care if you lost. The whole thing is okay. The Garvins win and whatever, but hey, by the way, I'm going to push him out of the cage. Now I'm alone with her. She's
right,
in the cage.
right,
It kind of makes sense because you're like a maniacal nut. You don't care about winning. You just want Precious.
right, right.
Is that like the just that's the thought process? Like this guy
Yeah,
doesn't care about winning and losing.
I want to get her alone, right? What difference
Yes.
does it make? So if we win or lost, and she was so good at facial expressions at the time. She was a great performer.
And of course, Jimmy Garvin has to go scale all the way up the cage and back down to get
Right.
back into you. So that was like I don't know. To me, that was almost better than some of the matches. The match isn't bad at all, but that's just it was cool like storylines. Like oh my god, somebody's got to get this sick bastard. We won, but we did really didn't win. He got the girl.
Yeah, yeah. It was done really well, I thought.
Production wise, do you think you guys could have done anything better to get the cage set up quicker? Because this does take a while for you guys to get the cage set up.
First of all, I almost thought because it took so long to get put up, and boy, it was swinging a little. JP, that
Hmm.
scared the shit out of me. I mean, Tommy Young was on top, and he was scared to death. I know he had to throw his underwear out. You know what I mean? Uh,
He seems scared. Yes.
yeah, it might have should have been on first to get the cage up and people walking in and seeing it, ooh and ah, and because it did take a long time. It took about 25 minutes, didn't it? Maybe even
Just a,
longer.
just a, just about. Yeah. Yep. Between
Maybe,
20 and 30 minutes. Yep.
yeah. So it went in flat anyway because people waiting so long. So I don't know.
I think that's part of the reason why you guys only had a few matches, maybe 5 matches on the pay per view. They're all longer, but setting up that cage took basically the length of a whole match.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they ever. It scares me now, but I'm not sure if they ever set that up until they set it up for the match.
Really? So they're not very experienced in setting it up, which
Yeah,
also led to the time.
yeah, and it was very difficult. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
So the Garvin Sullivan feud continues. Basically, they get the win, but you kind of almost got the last laugh.
right, right. I really enjoyed working with Jimmy.
What is it about like Jimmy Garvin? Because you were saying he was almost NWA champion. Do you think that he had the charisma and the potential and the wrestling ability to be world champion? I mean, you obviously like working with him. A lot of guys like working with him.
Jimmy had one of the most positive personalities I was ever around. I remember one time we were in Fort Lauderdale. We were both young baby faces, and we stayed at a hotel. And we ordered Chinese food. We had drinks. We went swimming. Everything. Jimmy is a very positive guy. I dove. I used to go scuba diving with Jimmy quite a bit. Uh, Jimmy was a guy that really enjoyed life. Really enjoyed life. I think he lives in the Caribbean half a year. Uh,
Wow, good for
yeah,
him.
it might be Costa Rica, but he lives on the beach, so that's nice.
So next up is Barry Windham with James J. Dillon versus Dusty Rhodes for the NWA United States Championship. Of course, Barry Windham is the champion. Interesting that Dusty Rhodes really was Barry Windham's mentor, if you really look at it. Then, of course, Windham turns heel. He joins the Four Horsemen, and then obviously that's the lead up for this match. Do you like that? I mean, that's pretty deep. And not that Windham is the main event level guy, Flair is of the Horsemen, but still, him and Dusty, that kind of leads you to almost main event level feud here.
Oh, he was by that time. let me see, 88. Yeah, I remember, I think I ran into Barry in 80 when he first started. I believe he started in 80. Uh, when I was working in Georgia, they sent me down to Jacksonville for a show, and I remember he was working with Dickie Murdoch. So he had been around, and